Hello, everyone. I'm Karen Pelto, and I coordinate the Natural Resource Damages Program on behalf of the Secretary, who is the Trustee of Natural Resource Operations, so located right here in the Bureau of Wayside Cleanup. And I just wanted to give you a little update and a sense of what's been happening. Basically covering just two main topics. Let you know who within DEP is working in what part of the state, and also give you some highlights from the past couple of years. We've had active trustee councils up and running for many years for various cases around the state, from the South Coast to the Berkshires to the Cape. Nyanza is in the Sudbury Aspect Concord watershed. Self-explanatory in terms of where they are around the state. Each trustee council has a primary representative and an alternate, as well as a legal advisor and in some cases technical advisors. And we operate on these cases in cooperation with our federal trustee, Onset Watershed, Sutton in our southeast region, that is in Walpole, in the upper Neponset Watershed, Sutton in our southeast region, that is in Walpole, in the upper Neponset Watershed, Sutton in our southeast region, that is in Walpole, in the upper Neponset Watershed, Sutton in our southeast region, that is in Walpole, in the upper Neponset Watershed. Sutton Brook is in Tewksbury in the Shawshene Watershed, northeast region, and Industriplex in Woburn, also in the northeast region, in the Aberjona subwatershed of the Mystic. And each of that involve ecological resources, but both Blackburn and Union and Sutton Brook also involve restoration of groundwater resources, which usually involves protecting aquifer lands, but can also include increasing clean recharge to aquifers, keeping water local, while these are facing. And these will be up and running this year, working with the public to identify projects. Speaking of working with the public, over the past 2 years, we have been engaged with the public on a couple of items. One, some initial outreach for Blackburn and Union, where we are starting to identify potential restoration projects with the town and with other stakeholders, as well as some amendments to some restoration plans that we had prepared in the past, where either an additional project was identified or additional detail relative to previously selected projects was shared with the public. When we settle a natural resource damages case under both federal and state law, we are required to prepare for public review and comment a restoration plan, and this also serves as an environmental assessment under the Policy Act. And that in Massachusetts involves a great deal of public process because of the type of state that we are and the type of stakeholders that we have engaged to draft a plan, and often work very early on to identify restoration projects. We don't like to draft a plan and just say, here, what do you think? Some highlights. One is for a case that was settled under state law with only the Commonwealth as the trustee, the secretary. That was in the Upper Mystic, and that related to a fuel oil spill that impacted the Mystic River in Arlington and Medford, and damage settlement with some penalty funds to fund two projects in the city of Medford and the town of Arlington to improve the riparian corridor, but also improve water quality. And I'll actually be going out later this afternoon, Arlington, where there's going to be an important update relative to that implementation of that project. But both of these are underway with the use of those settlement and penalty funds. Yesterday, I was in the town of Marion with the federal trustee agencies celebrating the completion of the Bird Island restoration, which was one of the very first projects identified by that trustee council back in 2000 or 19 in the 1990s. There are two islands in Boston that support the majority of the population of the Northeast's endangered terns, roseate terns, which are endangered, and common terns, which are a species of special concern, and they co-nest together. And this island had previously a stone revetment that was deteriorating. The Army Corps, under its restoration authority, was the project lead on repairing that revetment, When that project first started, it was simply repair the revetment, improve the nesting habitat. By the time it was implemented, we had included predictions for sea level rise to make sure that this had a 50-year design life and was going to be providing habitat returns. This was right after completion. The island is revegetating. Also, and I don't have a picture, but yesterday, and I have been out to the islands, we provide what look like little tents for the terns as additional nesting and hiding from predator areas. There's like little wooden boxes that they nest in. Well, gulls, actually. Gulls are a predator. Some other restoration highlights. I want to acknowledge in New Bedford, the Palmer's Island Trail improvements. It's wonderful to have this gem of a resource in the Inner Harbor receive funds not only from Bouchard but also from the New Bedford Harbor Settlement to help make that not only increase its habitat value but increase the amenities for the public to use that resource that is so near to them. A couple others, Nascatucket Bay State Reservation Trail improvements, as well as universal access to a couple of beaches by our sister agency, Department of Conservation and Recreation. On the left, you see what are called Moby mats, which allow folks in wheelchairs to access the beach and the shore. And this was literally right after it was put in, and according to DCR, the gentleman in the wheelchair said, "It's about blank time." So he was very pleased. On the right are folks putting oyster shells in the Buzzards Bay in Fairhaven, which will serve as nesting habitat for the larvae that are then introduced as part of the many injuries that occurred from this spill involved injury to shellfish and habitat, as well as injury to shoreline, which included the habitat but also the use by the public. So that's why both of these projects, some of our projects actually involve public. Going a little inland, I mentioned Nyanza is in the Sudbury, Alcivet, and Concord watershed. Paul attended the event to celebrate the improvement of the Red Maple Trail, which is on the bottom left, which goes through some floodplain forest, as has a viewing platform overlooking the river and its wetlands. It's also designed in many of its length to be universally accessible. We've also been working with folks to control the water chestnuts, which is an invasive aquatic plant, which was primarily because it was impeding recreational use. But it turns out, through consultation with Mass Wildlife, they also were of the opinion that it was outcompeting the native wild rice populations along the river that the waterfowl depend on. So it really is intended to benefit both people and wildlife. Wild rice restoration effort that will follow the chestnut removal process. I mentioned that Hoyoke coal tar, we went out for an amendment. That's because when we removed the Amethyst, the first dam on Amethyst Brook, we discovered in the impounded sediment a dam that no local historical society, a timber dam that actually ended up being, according to the folks who did the field archaeology historical documentation, one of the most interesting sites they've ever been to. A piece of the dam is actually left in place interpretively, but it's been fully documented. I had the pleasure of joining fellows, environmental professionals from Uruguay, Peru, and Mexico who were in Massachusetts for about a month. Took them out to the site to get a sense of the restoration project, but also the monitoring that's been taking place there. And those folks are on the right. The Amethyst Brook below the first dam that was removed, so they could go upstream and look at the second one. And finally, out of the Berkshires and the Housatonic settlement, the past couple of years have been focused on the land acquisition to conserve habitat component, which was the focus of the third round of funding. And over 300 acres has already been acquired. We are evaluating an additional several hundred acres of habitat for acquisition. Also, one of the key projects from a prior round was completed, and that was restoration of 10 acres of floodplain forest, as well as control of invasive species in Bartholomew's Cobble, which is a property owned and managed by the trustees of reservations. And what was interesting, not only, there's several interesting things. One, there was tremendous volunteer involvement in planting the trees. Number two, most of the trees are from the local organization Project Nave, actually collected seeds from the trees in the proliferating forests that already exist. And the third is that the farmer who is just down on the next property originally cleared all these trees and thinks we're insane for replanting them because it took him so long to take them all out in the first place. But it's been really a tremendous project and a tremendous example of monitoring to demonstrate the benefits that we hope to see through a restoration, which is certainly something that the trustees are obligated to do is oversight monitoring. And that wraps it. Thank you all so much.